Welcome, everybody, to today's virtual lunch. Marsha, I'm so grateful that you're here today.
I went to law school in California. I'm a former practicing lawyer, a former TV news reporter. For the last 20 years, I've been teaching lawyers how to communicate better. I do the presentation skills and thought leadership communications. I also happen to have another full-time job. I have a legal tech company. It's interesting that we've all found ourselves in this place. For me, I was fortunate that with a background as a TV news reporter, I had to learn how to present virtually. This is just like being a TV news anchor, except that we can't see the little boxes of the people that we're talking to. Instead, you're talking to the teleprompter, which is on front of the giant camera. And the hardest thing there and the hardest thing here is learning how to talk to the green light on your laptop or the webcam. So the trick for most of us is figuring out this stuff here. So what do I need to do for my space so that I look professional? People can see my face, but I look in a way that I would like to look, right? We don't want to look less than our best, but also to be able to communicate effectively in this virtual environment. And I think it's tricky, as you know, how many of you are doing actual presenting? So there, the trick is both the messaging piece as well as the surrounding elements. The question I get a lot is just, how can I look better? So for a lot of us, it's a question really of lighting. So Ari, we were going to experiment with you, right?
Can we just address the virtual background thing first? I have typically not used the virtual background.
So what I can see, Ari, first of all, is that the background is super busy. So if you were going to have a background for something more serious, more professional, I see this as kind of a continuum. You want something that's not busy and not distracting. The goal for a background that's virtual is typically to not distract, to look professional. So this background is more for fun. And especially when you're wearing a plaid shirt, there's a lot going on there. The second thing, move your arm. So you see what happens, or as you move forward and you move back with the virtual background, things tend to shift. Sometimes if you don't have much light behind you, when you move your arm, you'll look like the Flash. Your arm will sort of morph into other shapes. My best recommendation is to light the background. So you need to actually light the wall behind you, and that will make the virtual background work better. It's kind of like a green screen. It may take a fair amount of work, and then you've got to balance your face. So the amount of light on your face needs to work with the virtual background. So if there's a big difference between the two, it's not going to be all that effective.
So is arm's length, is that about right?
Well, part of it depends on where your camera is. Some people, are using the laptop. Some people are using something else. What I like to look at is how much of myself is showing up in the screen. I go ahead and pin my own video. I can see that right now you can see me from about here up. And that's because I'm dealing with too much light in my room because I'm still working this out. I say usually you want to be from maybe here up down to maybe waist up. So if you wanted to get a little closer, a little farther away, that's what I like to think about, is how much of me showing in the screen. You don't want a ton of headroom because then it looks like, you're way down here, and you also don't want to cut off the top of your head. This can be a nice option if you have a Mac, is something called eyeglasses. Eyeglasses. It's a download. I think it's $20. Eyeglasses lets you adjust what your webcam sees. And so I'm going to show you here. It lets me zoom in or out. So I'm just adjusting my eyeglasses here. See that? Once I adjust it, then I can move which part is shown. And so if you're in a space where you need your webcam not to be shooting such a wide angle, which most webcams do, this little app lets you do that. There is one that works on PCs.
All right, let's talk a little bit about sound.
So there are a number of options. The first question I would always ask is, what are you trying to achieve? The advice I give for people that are in environments where they absolutely have times when they can't afford to have background noise, in those situations, you want to have some kind of either a headset or earbuds or something along those lines. So the trick with having multiple mics or making switches from one session to another is you need to go into your settings. Audio input is your microphone. And then for output, you want to choose the thing that you're listening through.
What kind of lighting secrets can you share?
I would say that the most important thing is to have light on your face. So if that means you can get near a window, not in direct sunlight, but near natural light, that's always nice. And not have strong light behind you. You become backlit, then you become very dark. Try to get light shining on your face that's brighter than any light that would be behind you. The other thing to avoid is light directly above your head. That can create all kinds of nasty shadows and wrinkles and lines.
How do you convey energy and excitement?
It's mostly voice. If you were on the phone, you need to have energy in your voice. You basically have to take your whole personality and push it through the phone. It's using the voice, feeling like you're connecting, looking at the camera, and trying to connect vocally for the most part without gesturing so much that you're distracting. I've done a how to be a better virtual presenter for 4 law firms in the last 2 weeks. And so far I have sat at the desk. I've got my feet flat on the floor. I'm gesturing below the desk and I'm a little farther away and I'm adjusting the volume so that I don't blow them out.
Busy clothing, plain clothing.
Well, I think part of it is about your brand. Secondly, it would be about your audience. For video, normally, I would say solids are good. But if your brand is flowers, then I wouldn't change that. Maybe I'd just keep the background more simple. You want people to notice you and your message and not be distracted by things like what's in the background and what you're wearing. You know, if you were to walk in person into a room to greet a client, to shake their hand, or a prospective client, wouldn't you do everything you could to make a great first impression, to connect with them? Having the appropriate virtual persona is exactly the same thing. And the other thing I would mention is eye contact. You wouldn't meet in person with the client and not look them in the eye. And of course, when you're doing a Zoom and there are a lot of people on the Zoom call and we've got the Hollywood squares look, it's a little hard to tell. But if you're presenting, you can't be looking down here because that's where the chat is. You need to actually look at the eye of the camera. And that's pretty hard. So that takes a lot of self-control and a fair amount of practice. You can arrange your windows any way you want. I like to find one person and pin them to the top and then put them under the eye of the camera. So then that keeps me focused because that's where the movement is. That's tricky. So I would fall back on, you know, if there's someone else in your house right now that you could get to sit across from you so that you could talk to them. Most of us are wired for in-person communication. And so we're always looking for feedback. That's why webinars are frankly one of the scariest things for most of us because we're talking. I mean, I always like to use the analogy that when you're doing a webinar, you feel like you're sitting on the floor of your closet in the dark alone pontificating. Are they even there? Have they all left? We need that feedback. We need to read someone else's response to what we're saying. Otherwise, we can completely distract ourselves. So if you can get a warm body to sit across from you, that can be really helpful. If not, I would say, is it possible to get someone on camera somewhere on your computer that they can be giving you feedback? Whether it's a separate Zoom feed with just one person and you can put them up under the camera, giving you a safe place to look, especially if you have 2 screens, but make sure you have a wired connection because on Wi-Fi you could kill yourself.
Marsha, anything that you think people should take away?
It's not about perfect delivery. It's about connecting. The message doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, so we gesture a little too much. We said a few times. That's really not the goal. The goal is connecting, which is why this new virtual environment is so challenging for all of us, whatever the purpose is, whoever the audience is. And so for me, I put my feet flat on the floor. I sit up really straight, sit as though I were standing. I keep gesturing because that makes me feel like me. And I really make eye contact with that little green light. And I imagine that I'm talking to one person, a smiling person who really needs to hear just the thing that I'm able to share. I know I don't know it all, but I do know that I show up with the intention of being as helpful as I can. And I have to let that be enough.
Marsha Redmon, everybody. Virtual.
Thank you so much.